If we can start with the history of Orania, how this town came to be, how we got to be here today.
So if you ask the question of the history of Orania, you have to consider at least two histories. So the Orania idea, firstly, is an idea that is not a reaction to the end of apartheid.
Which a lot of people assume.
I think there's always been different people thinking in different ways. And I'd like to consider Oranians as people having an alternative view of what solutions in this country should be, where we are and where we should be going. In the 1940s, late 1940s, an organization with the name SABRA was created. It was created as a think tank, a conservative think tank. They advised the National Party on some things, and there was a point where the National Party didn't want their advice anymore. Now you can ask Karel in your other interview more about that. He's an expert on that field.
Sure.
But the short version is, Sabra said, if Afrikaners really and honestly consider themselves to be part of this continent, they should not try to rule South Africa as a party of minority rule. They should leave the peoples of South Africa to make decisions for themselves, rule over themselves. And if Afrikaners wants a place, they should go to a place where they can be a majority in their own area, and for that reason make decisions for themselves in regards to their religion, in regards to their politics, in regards to their schools and their economy and so on. That idea did not resonate very well with the NP at that stage. And a lot of things happened, you know, the history of South Africa developed as it developed, but that idea never completely died down. In the 1970s, 80s, an organization with the name Orania Werkers started working on the students, telling them, maybe there's another option. You know, most people look at the two options. NP stays in power or ANC takes over power.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of music of change was already playing in the 80s very loudly. Maybe there's a third option. Afrikaners do their own thing on their own place. And that started, a lot of Afrikaner students started listening and understanding that. And in the late 1980s, there was a strong movement with that idea. Afrikaners should just have their own place where they can legally own their own piece of land, which they legally acquire, and where very, very importantly, they do their own labor. But we can speak a bit more about that later. And that movement grew and grew and grew. Professor Karel Boshoff and Dr. Chris Joost, two intellectuals, academics, they said, listen, this is our opportunity. This is our opportunity to create a space for Afrikaners. This is our opportunity to realize this thing that we've been dreaming about for long, this third option, this alternative option. And they raised money. They managed to buy Orania and to start this project. And suddenly you have people moving, intellectuals mostly, because who moves to a place in the middle of the bloody desert?
No one would, unless your brains are not well.
So people left their jobs to move here. This is semi-desert. You can drive around 10 kilometers out of town, you'll see it's desert. Very hot, very cold, very, very little rain. And people moved here with nothing. No jobs, no economy, nothing. So there was a stage in Orania's history where it was the highest qualified per square kilometer in the country. Because who moves after an idea? Intellectuals, academics, doctors, lawyers, professors. And they moved here and they started trying to develop this. And that was days of hunger and thirst.
Jeez.
It was not easy days, right? But you had a lot of people with a pioneer spirit and with a plan, which they very, very... they believed in it with a lot of fire in them, you know. They said, we're going to do this, we're going to make it work. It wasn't as fast or as easy as people thought it was going to be. I don't thought it was going to be easy, but it took time. It's now more than 30 years later. And we're still a pioneer community, but we've achieved some things that are noteworthy. And that's why we say, test us not on where we are currently, test us on the trajectory of our growth. So that's Orania, the idea, and Orania, the reality, becoming one thing.
Yes, thank you so much. I want to go a few steps back. So we go back to the 1940s. Is it 1940s with Sabra?
Sabra was created in 1948.
1948.
Yes.
Sabra was an Afrikaner group, a think tank.
Think tank.
And they were saying to the National Party, which was the government at the time, we don't believe that Afrikaners as a minority should be looking after a majority of people. It's not sustainable, it won't last. So they almost foresaw that this won't last, this system that you have.
You should ask Karel a bit about that. He knows that history very, very well.
Yeah.
But that is in broad terms exactly what happened.
Sure.
They understood, and especially when you go a bit onwards. SABRA was created in 48 and they went through the 50s. The first conference, seminar about own labor practices, which we're going to speak a lot about today, I guess, was in 1956. But especially in the 60s with the winds of change blowing through Africa, right? The famous winds of change speech. A lot happened and they really realized that, we need to be thinking alternatively. And the NP didn't want that advice at that stage.
So we go a bit further. The National Party doesn't want to listen because people in power never want to listen, like our government today when we want them. And then 1991, this land comes up. Do you think there was any influence of the end of apartheid, the ANC coming into power, that maybe accelerated the movement of certain Afrikaners being like, you know what SABRA was foreseeing is happening. So I think this is the time to actually move now.